All right, welcome everyone. This is EOF Implementer Call number 71, April 16th, 2025. Today's agenda doesn't look too busy, but it actually is. Testing update, client updates. I ordered these. East got missed, so we'll do them after Ethereum JS. Spec changes and updates. This is going to be most of the discussion of the topic today, I think, is EOF bootstrapping. And East just showed up. That's awesome. That's syncing from the GitHub issue. Then we'll talk about the current test nets in the next test net, and then other comments and resources. If anyone has anything else they want added to today's agenda, please drop it in the chat, and we'll try and discuss it in the appropriate place. So first place we will start is testing update. And Mario's on the call. Mario, you want to
Hello.
kick us off?
Hello, yes. So we're planning a release rather soon. This is a general East release. So it will include Vectra test cases, but also will include like the EOF version. So my main concern right now is that I would like for us to have a DevNet 1 non-breaking release, because I wouldn't want for us to make a release that is neither compatible with DevNet 0, and it is not compatible either with DevNet 1. So what I want to like get finalized today is that we have every breaking change merged into East, either today or in the following days. That would be great. So if there's any PR open that we need to merge to make full compatibility with DevNet 1, even if there's not if there's missing coverage, that's still understandable. We'll make another release with more tests, but I don't want for us to make a release that is incompatible with DevNet 1. So yeah, that's the current state. I think Peter from Epsilon already told me about a couple of PRs that I will get to review today, and I will prioritize to get the merge. And yeah, basically, if everything is in place today, we can make the release. Otherwise, tomorrow we'll try to make the release. But if there's anything else, please just reach out. Yep, that's current East status.
Okay. Yeah. Is it correct that the only major change is TX create EOF bootstrapping?
Well, there is a PR. The PR that we mentioned is one that tests a removal of EOF creation transaction, and also it is contingent on the substitute, which is the legacy TX create, which is now the chosen sort of baseline. But we will be discussing this in later in the call. So if we choose that baseline, then yes, the PR is it's mostly done, but needs some polishes. But if we decide to pivot, then it might not be able to be ready today or tomorrow.
Right. So the changes, the ext call changes are committed. Simplified EOF create to new address hashing is committed.
Committed.
And this is using the 32-byte address for ASE, for address space expansion.
Correct.
Change kind data from 04 to OFF.
Committed, yes.
Container size to 4 bytes, and there's some discussion on Discord as to why we need this, and this is so we can make contracts bigger than 64K, and modify max stack height of all sections be max stack increase. And that, I think that was the last PR that went in just last week.
Yep.
So it's these two that we're currently going to get resolution on.
Well, the TX create is also committed, and the legacy TX create tests are also committed, which is the baseline bootstrapping solution. But what is not committed is the removal of the last line, basically, and the removal has the consequences of changing these blockchain tests, which are generated from EOF tests, which require some method to deploy EOF code.
Okay.
So yeah, so that's the only part that's actually well, undecided yet, I could say.
Yep. And that's on the agenda. Cool. So if things go well, we'll have a published set of tests by the end of the week or beginning next week, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Any other testing notes? Next week, I'll be starting fuzzing. Once people start getting success on the tests, I'm updating the fuzzer. It surprisingly, I had some dependencies on the container structure, which makes sense because we're fuzzing to the container. I'm currently updating that on my branch, and I've also brought it up to date with current um, EEFT code and the current EELS code. So I will get updates on that in 2 weeks, and you'll probably start hearing from me as I start finding findings. Um, I won't be too aggressive in sharing findings until your client is passing all the published tests, because that's the first thing we do is you run the published tests and the fuzzing. That's going to be some instant discoveries. Anything else? All right. Let's go to the compiler and client updates. Nethermind.
Up to the latest DevNet 0 test, there was an initial bug with the spec change around ambiguous contracts, but that's now fixed. So I think is it 2.2? Test version.
Okay.
And the DevNet 0 is now merged to our master branch, and DevNet 1 is still being worked on.
Okay. EVM1.
I don't think we have a lot of updates. Except the removal of EOF creation transaction. Everything I think is merged to master now. As in DevNet 1.
Yep. Okay. Next is Reth.
We had one bug on DevNet 0 tests that is fixed. Yeah, we only run state tests and EOF validation. I still didn't run blockchain tests. On DevNet 1, I'm running the test suite that Pavel created. I have few failings for mostly related to TX create. So I'm close to finishing that.
Okay. Geth. Anyone from Geth on the call? Ethereum JS. Anyone from Ethereum JS? No. EEST. Actually, that should have been EELS.
Yeah, so on the yield side, we are passing the version 2.3 of the tests, and we've got PRs up for TX create and the payout code.
TX
Payout
what
code
was it again?
tentatively because a couple of behaviors I think are still not determined, but we've got PRs up for the latest spec, whatever's updated.
Okay. And I missed that. Did you have the rest of TX of DevNet 1 ready?
No, rest of DevNet one, like TX create is the missing bit. Rest of it is right.
Okay. All right. Besu.
Yeah, you go, Dan.
Okay. So we had the same bug Ref had, but it was fixed in main. So I just merged it into our EOF DevNet 1 branch. So we'll be working on that. And TX create, there's some gas differences that we're going to be researching. But again, until we get resolution on bootstrapping on final form, that might change dramatically. But those are the current state.
Also want to bring up the pay opcode. We did say we wanted it on DevNet 1, right?
No, we're gonna
No?
do
Or
DevNet
2?
2.
Okay. That's not easy. Sure. But from what Charles mentioned on it, magicians, we have not yet made it available to the legacy EVM. Not sure if we want to go that way or not. Should we discuss it or not?
Yeah, let's go ahead and add that. Let's do that first.
Yeah. But Charles is not here, so
Charles is not here, and that's gonna be part of what my ask is gonna be.
yeah.
Okay. Anyone from Aragon? So there's no one here. Racy Tech did get a hold of me. He has a fork of Aragon that he implemented EOF in. But there's some complexity as to Racy Tech's relationship with Aragon right now that I don't know the details of, and I'm okay not knowing. So we'll just leave that there is a fork that has the info. And Aragon, we'll see where they land with getting support for this in the future. Compilers. Did I miss any clients that are on the call before I go to compilers? Good, I got everyone. Compilers. The first is Viper. Anyone from Viper on the call? Okay. Solidity?
So basically, Radek is pushing the work forward. We have a bunch of pending pull requests from him, finishing the implementation of the low-level optimizer, and we want to get that out in the next release that should go out around the time of Spectra. And yeah, this is pretty important so that people actually get like small bytecode and like don't complain too much. So we'll be prioritizing that. Other than that, there's also his PR enabling EOF create inline assembly. Though I actually discussed that today, and like the issue is that like just enabling it doesn't solve the problem, because like the use case is basically deploying like custom container, for example, like either custom just custom bytecode or even like low level use. So that will actually require like some more features in the compiler. So we'll like merge what's Radek implemented, but like to, for example, make like Solidity or something like that compile properly with all features will require like a bit more work after that. So that's basically it.
How are you handling creation salts in the end?
I mean, we're not doing any translation, so basically, I mean, currently in our prototype is still using the version that still had like the init container half there, but like when we switch to the more current version, we basically be relying on user to provide salt, and we'll block creation without salt provided.
And you will use the user-provided salt as is?
Yeah.
Does that correctly summarize it?
I mean, like, there won't be default salt, but yeah, we basically use user-provided salt as is.
All right. Any other compiler teams or questions before we move out of client and compiler updates?
Sorry, a follow up on the previous question. I was reviewing my notes. So I just want to confirm. So this use of the salt, as a result, new foo salt, right? Oh, sorry, let me paste this in the chat to be clear. An expression like this provides different security guarantees depending on legacy target versus EOF target.
Yeah, I mean, like on legacy, you have still have the init code hash and argument hash. On EOF, you basically only have the salt, and you have like to on your own kind of like figure out what to have to go there, because like we can't really provide anything that's like really equivalent, or I mean, even if you could like to be like very expensive. So the decision was basically like to leave that up to the users. It won't be like drop-in replacement anyway, so not necessarily worth trying.
So I just want to make it clear, I don't think this is a good idea. I do think we need to preserve the semantics. They shouldn't change depending on the target. And
but like, is the proposal what you propose, or like have like some kind of raw salt parameter and like have
that's what I said before. Like, yeah, and the default is like in this expression, when the user passes in a salt, in order to preserve the security guarantees, you would need to hash it together with the hash of foo, right? So you would emit a hash to do that, and the input as well, right? Now you see that it's expensive, and it will be a little bit expensive, but if you provide this escape hatch, right, by using the raw salt, anyone that cares about that would be able to skip that. This would be, I think, the best decision to make. And like maybe, I don't know, maybe in 0.9 this could be changed, but it just seems, it doesn't seem like a good idea to make it be so significantly different in 0.8.
But I mean, like, for example, that's not even the only difference. Like, you don't even have like nonce on it. So even if we do that, like deploying things twice would still like give you the same address. So it's kind of like feels like a just half measure. So
well, but I mean, it's very different to say like foo, like it's very different to say that no expression without salt doesn't compile in EOF target. That's fine because the code won't compile. But if it does compile and it does something that is not what you expect coming from legacy, that is what I find concerning.
Just a note about the cost is that the EOF create doesn't charge for the hashing anymore. So if you charge for it, it's not it should even itself out, I guess.
So I mean, it will be cheaper.
Sorry, say again.
So I mean, it will be cheaper than the legacy creation.
Well, the raw salt one will be, but the salt, the equivalent salt parameter new expression that Franjo suggests would, I guess, be the same cost as the legacy one,
roughly,
give or take, because you need to push some stuff around. But the hashing itself of the init code would be charged for once in both cases.
I see. I mean, like, to be honest, like, opinions are a bit divided, because, like, I personally, I wouldn't be like really against like doing something like raw salt, but like Daniel is really strongly against it. So if you're like strongly in favor of that, maybe would be best like to come to our team call and like talk with him directly, because like I'm not like strongly convinced that this is that much of a problem, but I'm not strongly convinced either way. But he's the one you have to convince, basically.
I'll try to go to a call or open an issue.
Okay, yeah. I mean, if you maybe I would think too, because like if you do that, will also. I mean, I also bring this myself on the next call. Like basically, we had one today, like basically 2 hours earlier. So yeah, we have some agenda for next week, but I can add it and we'll also discuss it. I mean, we discussed it because, and like I said, like kind of Daniel that didn't feel convinced. I'm not strongly either way, so it's ended at that. So basically, we need someone like who is strongly convinced other way to kind of like have good arguments and like we can figure something out.
Cool, thank you.
Okay. Any more discussion, or will this move to the Solidity call? All right, hearing no requests, we'll go on to the next step. We're going to talk about spec changes. We added legacy opcode support and EOF bootstrapping. As was mentioned in some of the discussions outside of this, Charles was concerned about, he didn't list any specific opcodes. He was concerned about opcodes only going into EOF and no longer going into legacy. And also, not Simon Dudley, another person on Twitter.
Rick Dudley.
Rick Dudley, that's what it was, yeah, Rick Dudley. Rick Dudley was also concerned about legacy not getting features that would be fine in legacy, like the pay opcode support. So should pay go in legacy? And here's my proposal. It defaults to EOF only when we talk about EOF only opcodes until we get someone in the appropriate ETH Magicians thread saying, hey, I think this would be useful in legacy. Can you please add it? And that's going to be the signal that we need from the outside, that if we go through the effort of adding it to legacy, that someone's actually going to use it. And I think that's my main reason right now for not wanting to add things into legacy, is we can add opcodes that'll do nothing more than increase test surface. And if nobody's going to use it, all we're doing is creating extra work. But if we get someone coming into the ETH Magician thread, which is there's an EIP, they link to a discussion forum, that's the appropriate place we should discuss it, because it creates a permanent record of what decisions were made and why. If it shows up in that ETH Magician thread, then I think we should consider adding it. I haven't seen that yet for anyone to pay, and I've explicitly asked Charles to do that. And I don't know why it hasn't got in there. So that's my thinking. Weakly held, willing to be persuaded against it. What do other people feel?
I think that's valid. It's not something that's prevented from happening in the future by not adding it now. So I don't think that's a problem.
There's one caveat which I think raised in one of the PRs to the pay opcode EIP, is that specifically the pay opcode has a problem of the return code. If it has a return code, then it must either align with EOF conventions or with for ext call, or with legacy conventions for call, or it would have a different behavior in EOF and different behavior in legacy. So this is something that always we need to keep in mind, that some opcodes if they are introduced in both, they might have different behavior.
That sounds like a bad idea.
Which one?
To have them behave differently in legacy and EOF. I would just say like if it should behave like EOF, and you just need to invert it in legacy code, right?
Yep, that's fine. I mean, just need to keep it at the back of your head. It seems to be missed quite often.
Is the overhead only in terms of testing, or like what are the reasons not to add these things to legacy?
So at least for client like Besu, the way we implement it, it's just updating a table to allow the opcode to go in a certain place or not, as part of the fork. And actually Besu has one table for EOF and EVM, and in the opcodes we check the version if it's version dependent. So it's either, if it's like Get has the 2-table solution, we'll just be adding a row in a table. And when Besu has the 1-table solution, it would just be finding a particular opcode and taking out the check that says, hey, I'm only valid if we're running an EOF opcode, otherwise act like we're an invalid instruction. So that's the client impact. It's not that much of a change. There might be some unit tests that they would update, depending on how many unit tests each client writes. But we would also need to write EEST tests, ETH tests, to cover all of the possible permutations of how that might get used. So that's where the real burden in a lot of these changes are, is we'll need to write the good coverage on the ETH test, make sure all the clients pass it, and make sure we manage it. So that's, most of the burden is felt by East on this.
I don't like the concept of waiting for a request to be made, particularly because there's always complaints about like how hard it is to stay up to date on EIPs and like all core devs, especially for quote unquote outsiders. So that's the reason why I don't like this. Like it would be very easy for there to be someone that would want it, but just won't see it in time to request it. That said, I think it's also a valid argument to say that we want to reduce the testing effort. So I'm not sure where to stand.
And that gets into the question, how much do we do outreach and query people versus how much do we expect them to voice their opinion? And my thought is logging into a discussion forum and just saying, hey, I'd like this. My thought is that's a low barrier. And yes, there are people that are quote outsiders to the process, but I think this is a way to bring the outsiders into the process and get them participating and get their voices heard. I mean, it's tricky. Do we do outreach only, or do we wait for people to come to us? And I think it's kind of a mix of both we should do. We should, find ways to ask people, hey, do you want pay in legacy? Please post your findings to this forum if you think it should. Because I don't think we can design stuff on Twitter. I don't think we can design stuff on one of the many Telegram groups that go around. Just because a request is made somewhere, at some point we need to formalize that in there. And if someone makes a request in Twitter and someone champions it and brings it in, I think that's fine too. But yeah, so the question is, for all of these opcodes that we currently have in EOF, which ones do we bring in? Pay is, I think, the highest value one. Do we bring in some of the other ones? Like the data doesn't make sense. Anything with immediates doesn't make sense. But I feel like there's some others that might make sense that aren't immediate driven. They're escaping my mind right now. Ben?
Yeah, I'd just like to repeat that not including it isn't an irrevocable decision. So if it was desired after, Pusaka, it could be brought in the legacy in Glamsterdam, for instance. It's not like it wouldn't be too hard to bring back. it'll bring in them.
The other ones that could make sense, as far as I can tell, are return data load. Honestly, they should be completely decoupled from EOF, my opinion, and also the ext call opcodes.
Return data load, that was the one I was thinking of. And ext data load, but that also brings in the thing where we would be bringing in EOF. Yeah, and this is something we could do in EOF DevNet too, to be honest. So we don't have to do this in DevNet 1. Okay, I don't think we're going to reach a decision on this today. And we need to spend a lot of time talking about EOF bootstrapping. So I am going to time box this. And encourage people to come back with opinions in the next call. And Camille's chat message I will read later. But let's move on to EOF bootstrapping. This is the big decision. We probably need to come to a resolution today. To set the table, right now there are 6 ways. So the question of bootstrapping is, how do we get an EOF contract into the current system? We are on probably our 3rd step of figuring out what the best way to do this is. The original idea was to use a creator contract pre-deploy. And the reason we're even having this discussion is because we were going to ride in the coattails of EIP 7666, which was going to pre-deploy an identity contract replacement for the pre-compile at slot number 4, and to bring that in. And all the heavy work for getting 3 deploys done was going to be done by that contract. That has been moved out of scope for Pectra. So we can't do that. Another piece of the puzzle we had was something that we added into Pectra when EOF was still in Pectra to deal with the absence of the TX create and the creator contract EIP 7698. Basically, we took the old legacy create transactions of type 0, 1, and 2, and we created a semantics where we had the EOF container, and after the EOF container, you had call data. Both of these are intended to be sunset. So we need to figure out how we're going to do this. 7698 is not, it crosses too many lines, and creator contract we can't do. Currently in the spec, our solution is to add TX created to legacy EVMs. So we're opening that door of putting stuff that's not mandatory requiring container into the legacy contracts. And then that allows us to do a creator contract in the current in vogue method, which is to do use next method to deploy it at a certain location and use that. So we have a creator contract, just not at a nice precompile location. There have been some questions on Discord, which brings us to steps 4, 5, and 6, which is it says maybe we keep TX create legacy, maybe we don't. But what the people asking for this really want is to have the same 2.nil handling in the initcode transactions. And options 4, 5, and 6 outline 3 different ways to do this with different implications on the address creation logic. So that sets the table for some of these for the pre-read. And having set the table, I will open it to anyone who wants to discuss and express their opinions.
Can we? What is the reason for limiting the length of initcode to 1?
The options 4 and 6, I presume, right? This is to avoid the logic to choose which init code is meant to run. Because it could be the first one, but I mean it's kind of cleaner to just restrict. I mean, it's not really mandatory, I guess.
Yeah.
But it seems to be like, I mean, one could invoke a second TX create, like invoke a TX create inside that first init code and try to deploy some other init code. I'm not sure if that's a valid use case, but it just originally it felt cleaner to just restrict it to 1. But It's not set in stone.
And in option 4, what would be the resulting address? Oh, I see. It's like a creation transaction non-spaced. Okay.
For 4, yes, that would be because there's in the option 4, there's no way to specify the salt which you would like to use.
Yeah.
There's an opinion that I mean, while the options 4, 5, and 6, mainly 5 and 6, I guess, 4 has some problems. So options 5 and 6 allow 2 features, which I think were asked for. One is what the creator contract offered, which is the multi-chain deployment support, which sort of as a byproduct got better because we had the the creator contract deployed at a specific address, pre-deployed to a specific address, and then that could be used for convenient multi-chain deployments without the Nix method. And so option 3 doesn't support this, and the other feature is that was asked for is that with option 3 we don't have a default deployment method that would just work from the first block of Osaka, because with the legacy TX create trick, as Daniel said, we need to deploy the factory first.
So 5 and 6, they don't include the calling target's address in the deployment, do they?
Sorry, I had the siren going off. Can you repeat?
So option 4 includes the sender address and the nodes, RLP encoded to create the address. Options 5 and 6 do not include the sender address. They only include the content of the contract. Is that intentional?
Yes, although it might not be well thought through yet. It is quite fresh. The reason is because if you include the sender, then if you would like to have a stable factory deployed using this method, then you need to have a particular address or a private key. You either use the Nix method or you use a particular private key that you need to keep around to make deployments on other chains. And
yeah, I just realized this.
Getting rid of the sender allows you to at least liberate yourself from that particular address.
So I realized this just now rather than last week when we first discussed it, but 5 and 6 can be front run. And if your contract depends on sender for security, they front run you and steal the contract.
Yes. I mean, this is the discussion we had while we were discussing the creator contract, whether front runnable, whether this multi-chain support is more important than the front runnability or front running protection, so to speak. But in the creator contract, we were able to solve this by having a flag, while here adding a flag that's still an option, but that would complicate the logic even more. So I personally don't like that very much. At the same time, you still can, and it is expected that with this method, 5 and 6, you could deploy a factory which does protect against front running. So if we're talking about bootstrapping, then also there's this assumption that this is not going to be the only deployment method that's used in the wild.
But this would be the default one that would be accessed by people using native facilities. So I kind of think we have an obligation to have the most secure with default mechanisms.
Yes, but if you include the sender, then sort of you cannot uninclude it later. So whatever factory you deploy with this will have the address dependent on some sender, and that is kind of problematic. And I mean, like the overarching comment I would like to make is that those ideas 4, 5, and 6 are pretty fresh. And there is the sentiment that 3 is somewhat a safe option, because we don't really commit to any behavior of the 2 nil transactions, initial transactions at this point. And if there's need, these still can be introduced later. Like, for example, even today, I think we had 2 more ideas of how we can bootstrap or do this, like alternatives to 6, which is we can have a new init code type 2 type, whatever we call it, which would just be a nice version of 6 with proper fields and no no parsing of the TX data. And also there was another one, which I actually forgot now. Oh, that we could have it as default field in the init code transaction, which is sometimes used, sometimes not, which is also maybe a bit cleaner, but not really. So, I mean, the gist of this, what I'm saying is that we have, I mean, this is maybe too early to commit to any of these solutions, and 3 is the safe option.
For completeness, I also sent another option in the chat, which I gather is that nobody likes it, but I also think it's quite simple. It's just init code transactions with 2 nil run the data as legacy code, and then you can use that to create to trigger TX create.
Yeah, I think we had this on the list, but we dropped it. The reason being that it seemed to be the worst of all these, strictly because if you run this as a creation transaction, you need to somehow end that, and presumably you would end it with self-destruct, which is kind of ugly, and you lock the use case into self-destruct being there in legacy, and it also locks you into legacy VM in general.
Can you clarify the asterisks in multi-chain support in 4? I don't understand that yet.
So it's explained, maybe not in full, in the features section just below.
Yeah.
So I think, and someone will correct me, so if we have 4, that means that we have a init code transaction with a 2 nil field. And that would be the way, say let's assume that we want to use that kind of a transaction together with the Nix method to deploy our factories. However, as far as I know, Nix method doesn't work for type other types other than 0, cross-chain, of course.
Oh.
So, and the init code transaction as it stands now, it inherits from type 1559, so type 2, I guess, type 1, I don't know. So I think, unless I'm mistaken somewhere here, you cannot really use Nix method across chains.
Yeah. Yeah, the problem is the chain ID.
Yeah, exactly.
But how would the other ones be better? I mean, none of these solve that, right?
I mean, no, they solve it because you don't need to use Nix method.
Because you don't include the sender, but then it's front running.
Exactly.
It's front run vulnerable, right? Yeah. I only now understand the whole spectrum, so I'm gonna need to think about this. But it does seem like none of these are nice.
Exactly. That's kind of the big point.
Regarding this front running issue, like, is it only about like someone front running and deploying the contract, or like actually being able to overwrite your contract that you deployed? Because like if it doesn't have sender, then kind of like anyone could just redeploy it.
The front running is just, I think, if your init code doesn't depend on the sender or the value that the endowment value that you send in, or some other maybe fields of the transaction, then the front running is just a weird surprise. Because,
But I mean, like, you init code to like make external calls or like do something that to deploy like something, even if it's the same, it could deploy something different, I guess, right?
Yeah, it could, but that would need to, I mean, if the init code doesn't depend on externalities that can be manipulated, then I guess the front running doesn't change anything, so you get the same result at the same address in the end. But if you call something that will check TX origin, or it will check the value and somehow alter the behavior of the init code, then yes, that could be bad.
Okay, so basically, I mean, like, it's up to you to like make sure that's the case, and if not, like,
yeah,
I mean, that there are like some valid use cases where kind of it wouldn't be meaningfully overwritten.
There are use cases, yes. If, like, for example, if we were to deploy the creator contract using this, the creator contract just, deploys very simple bytecode. So anyone can do this, and the result is always the same.
Okay, I think I get it now. Thanks.
Ben, you have your hand up?
You're muted, Ben. Mic issue.
Mic issue. Who's gonna get a type?
There's got to be some sort of birthday paradox of mic issues in Zoom calls. Like, the more people you have, the more likely it is.
Right. So maybe while Ben resolves the mic issue, the question, I think, is whether we can allow ourselves to just stick with 3 and not have these 2 features in Osaka, or at least in DevNet 1. How would that hurt adoption of EOF? And whether it's a big issue or we can live with it.
So the idea would keep TX create forever in legacy and consider for DevNet 2 or a future fork 4, 5, or 6. Is that what the question is?
Well, 4, 5, or 6, as we said, nobody really likes them too much. So any either a 2.0 design or a new transaction type maybe would deliver these 2 desired features, and that could be DevNet 2 or the next upgrade. And now the question is whether we can wait or not.
So we would add 2 new transaction types, or would we change the transaction type?
So, I mean, the other, like, the new transaction type is maybe justified because it would avoid all the overloads that we are now discussing in the options 4, 5, and 6. And you would just have one init code field.
But coming from the testing implementation perspective, a second transaction type is not good.
I know. But I mean, you have a lot of testing surface in options 4, 5, and 6 as well.
So there's more testing surface in the variants, but there's also 2 different transaction types to be fuzzed. and to have code passed to the code. It's not a low lift to add a new transaction type.
No, that's understood. But if you have like some, for example, take 5, for example, or maybe 6. Interpreting TX data, like dividing it, and then that's like a whole new abstraction that none of the transactions do right now. I mean, the EOF creation transaction did that, but it also was ditched for, among others, for that reason, right? So avoiding having to parse the TX data and have some custom behavior based on that is also a good thing.
I mean, based on this discussion, it almost sounds like 2 is better than 4, 5, and 6. Just leaving 2 in.
But 2 also has the problem of being non-spaced. It has the problem of this TX data hacking.
And it has all of the same security features of existing transaction types too, all the security problems and security features. So the advantage there is not much changes. I mean, if we're picking which pain point we're going to feel, it's almost tempting to say the pain we're feeling now is the pain we're familiar with and we know how to deal with, rather than introducing 2 types of pain.
I don't know.
Ben, is your mic working?
We cannot hear anything.
Okay.
I agree that 2 sounds better, and you would be able to use Nick's method at least.
So I don't think we're going to come to convergence in 3 minutes. And I'm not sure running overtime is going to bring us to convergence either. Should we?
I mean, just to make it clear, because you have sort of took me by surprise with the option 2 now. Would you say that what you're saying is that to have both TX create and the creation transaction? Because we are having TX create and init code transaction for also a different set of reasons, which we discussed a couple of calls before. And if we have that, then I would argue that having legacy TX create is much less painful than a whole behavior on the which is EOF creation transaction number 2.
Right, because you could deploy legacy TX create from the existing create 2 stuff that's on most chains, which has a known toehold.
Right. Yeah.
So, but I guess back to the point I was making, I don't think we're going to get a good answer in the next 2 minutes. Should we schedule another meeting in a week, do an off meeting week, focus just on resolving the EOF bootstrap issue? And our action right now is to keep 3 as is, pull 2, and next week we could adopt 4, 5, or 6 or change 2. But for the purposes of getting tests ready, we keep 3, pull 2, and discuss next week if we change from these.
In 2 weeks, you mean?
In 1 week. We discuss it next Wednesday.
Sorry, to pull 2, does that mean to can you clarify what it means?
So right now, 7698 is in there. You can create an EOF contract from a type 0, 1, or 2 transaction. We would get rid of that feature, and we would require people to go through a TX trade transaction, which we have a test ready to go. So we could kind of get a feel in the next week for how it would be, whether we need to add a replacement for 2 or keep 2 and 3. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is we don't have enough data, but we need to do something to get tests out to get clients moving forward. And 3 and 3 alone sounds like the best way to get people moving further.
Sounds good to me.
Hey, Dano, could you put all of those comments that you just said in this note, just so we know what we are trying to resolve and come to conclusion next week?
Yeah, I'll save the transcript and try and synthesize it. I have some notes in here that I've been taking, but I've been participating more than taking notes. But yeah, and I'll add this to the notes for the discussion we'll have next week. But to get the beta of the DevNet 1 tests out, we'll assume the answer is 3, and that's subject to revision. But we can get tests out. All the other breaking changes are fine. It's just the contract creation bootstrapping that's going to be impacted on the tests. And I think that's not the best place to be in, but it's better than waiting a week for tests, I think. Okay. We're over time, so I'll send update to schedule the call in a week, same time, same place. Thanks for everyone calling in, and we'll see you in a week. And let's continue this discussion on the Discord and in the TX Create ETH Magicians thread. I'll also post that here. There. All right. Thanks.